Okay, today we're going to be talking about the MR2. If you've been following along on the website, you probably saw this one coming up next. So we'll start off with just the stats. It's a 1991 Toyota MR2 Turbo. I've owned it for 13 years now, and I don't have any plans to ever sell it anytime soon. This is a Canadian car with original paint. It makes somewhere around 400 wheel horsepower, and it weighs around 2,800 pounds or so. So let's get to the wheels right away. These are Volk SF Challenges. They're 18 by 7.5 plus 22 offset up front and 18 by 9 plus 35 offset in the rear. And as far as I know, this is the only MR2 in the world with this exact set of wheels. There's other ones out there with the same style, but a different color or different fitment. I had to order these specifically in this exact sizing, so I could be wrong. If you know of one, please let me know, but as far as I know, this is the only MR2 with these wheels. The suspension is pretty straightforward. It's just a set of Cusco coilovers and a front strut bar, and a TRD rear sway bar and cross brace. And the brakes are stock sized with drilled and slotted rotors and EBC red pads. The rest of the exterior is fairly simple. It's just an AeroWare front lip, a pair of Greddy side skirts, and matching Greddy rear add-ons on the rear bumper as well. It's also got JDM clear turn signals up front and 94 and newer rear taillight conversion. And you can also see in the rear that it has a 3-inch Blitz Nurspec exhaust, but we'll get more into the performance side of things a little bit later on in this video. There's not much to see under the hood. There's just an amp for the stereo in the place of the original spare tire, which obviously wouldn't help me much with this wheel and tire setup. Other than that, there's not a whole lot to see in there. It's just the stock location of the battery. Now, the original sealed beam headlights were absolutely awful, so I upgraded those to some projectors with HIDs. And the only downside with these is that with the lights flipped up, they actually kind of look like eyeballs, and it makes the front end look like a smiley face. Okay, now let's take a look at the interior. It's got the original black leather. The most attention-getting mods in here are probably the steering wheel and the gauges. This is a suede personal steering wheel, and I'm using a Momo hub with an energy quick release. These are Defi BF series gauges, and I've got a boost gauge on the left, exhaust gas temperature in the middle, and then water temperature on the right, as well as a AEM wideband air fuel gauge. And the big thing for me was that I wanted the gauges to be in my line of sight. I didn't want to have to look across the dash or down to the center console to see them while I'm driving. This is pretty important information on a highly modified engine that you want to see up front and center. I also went with an OEM shift knob from a 1998 JDM car. And I also added leather shifter and e-brake boots with matching red stitching. And you can see down there a set of pedals those are actually from a 7th gen Toyota Celica GTS. And the only other thing in here was an older Kenwood head unit. Behind the driver's seat I've got a fire extinguisher just in case the worst case scenario ever happened. At least it would give me a fighting chance if I was on the side of the road and things caught fire. Around here on the passenger side, again, behind the seat, I've got just a 12-inch slim subwoofer back here in a custom-made box. I felt like this was the best location to put this. That would be fairly out of the way. It takes a little bit of space from the passenger seat, but nothing too terrible. So there's some pretty cool things to talk about with the engine and drivetrain on this car. It is the actual original 3S GTE, which is Toyota's 4-cylinder turbo engine from the 90s. It's still a 2-liter displacement, but the bottom end is built. And the head's also been worked on a bit, and it's got HKS cams in it. The turbo setup is an older TD06 turbo with an external wastegate and a full 3-inch exhaust front to back. And I've also got a stainless steel fan shroud with two 10-inch fans just to help manage the heat a little bit. I have these run to a switch in the cabin. It's also got a Greddy side mount intercooler, which feeds into a big intake manifold and throttle body. And it also has a Tilton twin plate clutch and a carbonetic limited slip differential. Both of those are extremely rare parts for an MR2. And I wanted to keep the engine bay real honest. There's no wire tuck here. I didn't try too hard to hide things. I don't know, I don't think the engine bay of the MR2 is that good looking to begin with, no matter what you do. So I didn't think it was worth the effort to try and go out of my way to make it pretty. Now all the electronics are located in the trunk here. It's running an AEM Series 1 EMS, which was tuned by Marco at Magnus Motorsports in Toronto. It's actually a plug-and-play standalone, so I was able to keep the original factory wiring harness and it just plugs right in, it saves you a big headache of wiring the entire car. This engine setup is nothing like a modern turbo car, that's for sure. It's got some turbo lag and it's fairly lazy off of boost, but I think that adds to the character of a 90s sports car. I would imagine it has a similar feel to cars like the Ferrari F40 or even the older 911 turbos as far as being sort of violent and unpredictable. And so what some people might think as a bad thing, being turbo lag, I think it suits the character of the car. So not much on this car has changed over the last 10 years or so. To be honest, I'm happy with the power level and I'm happy with the way it looks and the way it drives. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of chasing more and more horsepower and just to end up with a car that's too much of a hassle to drive around anymore. I think that's a common mistake that people make of chasing certain numbers, and then you never end up seeing the car again because it's just not drivable and it's not fun anymore. Right now it has more than enough power to hold its own out there, and enough to make me a bit nervous every time I drive it. I think all of the mods add up to make a really raw car. It doesn't have any traction control or stability control. It's got no AC, no cruise, or any of those type of creature comforts. You really have to be alert and focused to drive this car, even just on city streets. And that's exactly the excitement I was looking for. If I wanted something smooth and easy to drive, I would just take the 4Runner. I wanted this to be more of an experience. And this is the only vehicle of mine that I chose not to ceramic coat. I'll probably end up making a separate video on that one to dig a bit deeper into my reasons behind that in the future. But this one, I'm actually just using an old bottle of Wolfgang Deep Gloss paint sealant on this one, believe it or not. The paint is super thin and super soft, so I've got to be extremely careful with how I care for it. And like I said, that's a topic for another video. So that's going to do it for this walk around video. The mod list for this car is really a mile long, so I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot. But if you want to know every detail of the car, make sure you check out the feature article on CanadianGearhead.com. I'll put a link to it here in the description for you. Stay tuned for more content with this car, the 4Runner, and the Harley. If you want to subscribe, feel free. If not, that's okay. We can still be friends. Thanks for watching, though, and thank you to those of you that have already subscribed and commented on these videos. I'm going to do my best to keep adding interesting stuff to this channel, so stay tuned. Have a good one, guys.